Guys, if you ever get a nightmare, see, I'm not even saying dream. If you ever get a nightmare about a creepy shed or a creepy part of the estate or the house, just don't go, alright? It's not worth it. There's no point to it. Okay. Oh my god. We have Mr. Ballen again. Check this out. One of the reasons why I keep going back is that I usually use horror stories on YouTube for my ASMR, and these days, for quite some time now, the only thing I usually watch in order to make myself feel anything would either be horror or comedy. Nothing in between. That's it. Horror or comedy. That's all I ever watch these days. And why don't we just go for it? Are we good with volume? Okay.
Today's story is wild. I mean,
Is it?
honestly, it doesn't even sound real. But
Holy
we
crap.
pulled the story directly from newspapers all around the world. So it definitely did happen. But before
Did it? I mean, just because it's on the newspaper doesn't mean it happened the way it is perceived. That's always a big question. It's always a big thing. I mean, that's the reason why the concept of fake news exists. That's the concept of forming a narrative or providing a narrative for the masses at large exists. But I mean, did it happen the way it was perceived? That's the question.
we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you,
Yes, it is.
please swap out the like button spray deodorant for extremely harmful pesticide. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications.
Like, share, subscribe,
so
you
don't
guys. You
miss
know what
any
to
of our
do. Help
weekly
us out.
uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
Yes, we shall. Her face? That's the title of the
One
story.
evening in September of 1885, a young woman named Mary stepped out of the backseat of a carriage onto a dirt road in rural England. She had traveled 100 miles from London to the countryside because her husband's aunt had invited her to come visit. Standing on the dirt road, Mary looked up at the big country house. Then she grabbed her suitcase and walked up to the front door and knocked. Then, a moment later, the aunt's maid opened the door. She greeted Mary and took her suitcase and brought the suitcase to the guest room, while Mary headed straight down the hallway to her aunt's bedroom. When she got there, Mary gently knocked on the door and then opened it up. And when she looked inside, she saw the aunt lying in bed, and, the aunt looked up and saw Mary and she smiled, but she was very old and very frail, not doing too well physically, and, that's part of the reason Mary...
If you've been called to a distant relative, to a distant dying relative, that's usually a good news. It means you're being bequeathed or you're being provided for in the will. But my advice is don't go. You know why? There's usually orders included in the said bequeathment.
Mary was here to just kind of see her while she still could. But the aunt looked up and saw Mary and recognized her, and so she smiled, and Mary came in and sat down next to her.
Right,
For a
so
couple
far,
of
so
minutes, the
good.
two women just had some small talk. Mary talked about her journey from London to, the countryside where she was now, and, the aunt talked about what she was up to. It was all just kind of, pleasantries. But at some point, the aunt kind of stopped and looked up at Mary, and she had this obvious look of pity on her face. And Mary immediately picked up on it. She's kind of looking back at the aunt, wondering what's going on here. And then the aunt just says to Mary, "Really, how are you holding up?" And immediately, Mary, when she heard this, she felt this knot in her throat, and she had to fight back tears. I mean, she knew exactly what the aunt was talking about. So even though Mary was a young woman, she was already a widow. Her husband had died in an accident about 2 years earlier, and it had sent Mary into this spiraling deep depression. I mean, she was still completely grieving the loss of her husband.
So is the aunt on the husband's side, or is it on her side of the family? That's the question.
He had been the love of her life. And, her extended family and her husband's extended family were all well aware of how badly Mary had been doing. And so they had been extending her invitations constantly to come visit and basically just not be alone. I mean, that was the reason really why her husband's aunt had invited her here, is because she knew Mary likely wasn't doing well.
So husband's
now, to
side.
Mary, this was nice in a way. I mean, she felt very comforted by the family members, and it did seem like people genuinely cared about her. But at the same time, she started to get the impression from basically everybody in her and her husband's family that they kind of expected her to, grieve this loss, but ultimately move on. Like, find somebody else, basically. You're young, like, get remarried, start a new life. But to Mary, she just wanted to be like, no, I'm never gonna find anyone like my husband. He was the love of my life, and no one will ever match him, ever. Like, I'm done. I probably will never get married again. Like, he was it for me. And so, at that moment, Mary really just wanted to end this conversation with her husband's aunt. Like, she didn't want to get into how she was feeling about her husband because it was bad. She felt bad. But instead of saying that to her husband's aunt, she just said, you know what?
Of course she can't.
I'm okay. I'm just totally exhausted from travel, and I'm gonna go to bed. The aunt nodded and told Mary that, we'll have plenty of time to visit tomorrow, so go get some sleep. And so the two women hugged, and then Mary got up, she left the bedroom, headed to the guest room, she found her suitcase, got on some pajamas, and then crawled into bed. But a few hours later, in the middle of the night, Mary suddenly bolted upright in her bed. She was sweating, she was shaking, she was totally disoriented. It took her a few minutes to even remember where she was. But then finally, when she did and she realized she was safe, she realized she had just had this awful, visceral nightmare that she really couldn't even make sense of. In this nightmare, she was looking out at this huge open field. It's nighttime, and there's nothing but this field. But off in the distance, there was this broken down small shed. It was just sitting there conspicuously right in the middle of this field. And even though Mary was terrified of the shed, she felt this overwhelming urge to go to the shed and investigate. And so it's like with every step as she walked through this field closer and closer to the shed.
Guys, if you ever get a nightmare, see, I'm not even saying dream. If you ever get a nightmare about a creepy shed or a creepy part of the estate or the house, just don't go, alright? It's not worth it. There's no point to it.
Her fear was rising, and then finally, when she got close to the shed, she began to hear what sounded like somebody moaning inside of the structure. And so now she's really
So moaning, that would have been the perfect time to walk in the other direction. Scratch that, not even walk. Just, you know what? Start running, right? You don't want to see what's inside. I mean, if someone's having like sexy times inside a shed, just imagine what kind of people would have sexy times inside a shed. It's probably not people you want to see having sexy times, alright?
scared, but she keeps walking towards the shed, and then she's right outside. She can't see into the shed, but she can hear the moaning, and she sees her hand just come down and fling the door open, almost like she didn't want to, but her body's acting on autopilot. And then she looks into the shed, and there's this figure tucked into the corner, kind of in the shadows, and it's the thing making these moaning sounds. And it turns, and Mary sees it's this woman, this emaciated, destroyed-looking woman, but her face is the same face as Mary's dead husband. And as soon as she saw that, it jolted her awake. And so that's where she was, sitting in her bedroom, trying to make sense of what she had just seen. And so after 15 or 20 minutes of Mary trying and failing to fall back asleep because of this horrible nightmare,
no point to it.
Mary finally says, you know what, I'm just gonna go outside, clear my head, go for a walk. I know it's the middle of the night, whatever. You know, I'll bring some brandy along and sip that to calm my nerves and just kind of walk around until I'm calm, and then I'll go back to sleep. So she hopped out of bed, she grabbed her flask of brandy, grabbed her jacket, got her shoes on, and walked out the front door.
Of course.
About 15 minutes later, Mary was walking up a hill with the moonlight casting down on her. She was sipping her brandy as she went and was already beginning to calm down. Now, Mary was used to living in the city, in London, and so being out here in the countryside was so different. It was so beautiful and peaceful and spaced out that she had kind of just begun walking and not stopped. I mean, she originally thought she would just stay on the aunt's property, but already she was well beyond the property lines and was basically just out exploring in the middle of the night, and she was having a nice time. And so up the hill...
Guys, I know some of you are warriors out there, but after a nightmare like that, being in the countryside or in a stranger's estate, don't do it, alright? Because I promise you, right, being in an estate like that, you know how rich people do it? They would lose dogs on the property, right? And I'm not talking about your fur baby dogs. No, we are talking about killer dogs, one that have been trained to basically take down targets. They would basically roam the property as guards. All right, so don't do it.
Mary goes. Now, remember, Mary has never been to this area. This is basically an all-new place.
Red flag.
She has no idea what's over here. And she goes up this hill, she crests the top, and she gets a look at what's up there for the first time.
Oh, look, there's a shed.
And when she sees what's up there, she freezes. She's looking out at this huge field, basically in all directions. And in the center of this field, maybe a couple 100 yards away, is a single small structure.
Of course.
A broken down wooden shed that looks nearly identical to the shed she had just seen in her nightmare. And as soon as she saw that, she's terrified because she knows it's the same one or it's eerily similar. But worse than that, when she saw it, despite her own fears and trepidations about being up here, she felt herself moving towards the shed. It was like her body went into autopilot the same way it did in her
that's why you
dream.
don't explore.
It was like she had to go to the shed, even though everything inside of her logically is saying, don't go.
Don't do it.
But into the field she goes. She deviates off the path and just starts walking towards the shed. Her heart is beating like mad. And as she's getting closer and closer, she even begins to hear moaning sounds coming from the shed. It's like she's living out the nightmare in real life.
Oh my God.
She can't make sense of it. She wants to go back the other way, but she can't stop herself. She's just going towards the shed. And then finally she reaches the shed, and now for sure she can hear moaning coming from in this building. And she sees her hand reach down, and she flings open the shed, and she looks in, and sure enough, there is this dark figure tucked in the corner, clearly moaning. Like, this is her nightmare in real life. But when the person inside the shed turned to look at Mary, it was a woman, but they didn't have her dead husband's face. Instead, it was a woman who practically looked like she was dead or close to death. She obviously needed help. Now, at this point, Mary was kind of relieved. I mean, this whole situation is terrifying, but she was expecting to, somehow see her dead husband's face on this person in the shed. And so when it wasn't, and it was just like a normal person, albeit in a very strange set of circumstances, it was a relief. But now Mary didn't know what to do. It's like she's standing there looking at this woman, having no idea what to do. She doesn't understand how she could have dreamed this and now basically lived it too. Like, nothing's adding up. But again, it was like her body continued to operate in this autopilot mode. She suddenly had this really intense desire to go into the shed and help this woman. She didn't know who she was. This is a total stranger in the middle of a field in a shed who's moaning and looks terrible.
Guys, of course, there will be times everyone, you'd like to assume that everyone here is a good person. But there are times when it's not exactly appropriate to act like a good person, alright? Have some sense of self-preservation or something. Just go, run.
Terrible. She has no idea what's going on, but in she goes. And she sits down next to this woman who's now kind of eyeing Mary, like, what are you doing in here with me? And Mary says to her, like, hey, what's going on? How'd you get here? What's wrong? Like, what's happening? But the woman, it was clear she wanted to respond to Mary and, tell her what was going on. But, she was too weak. It was like she really was on death's door here. And Mary could clearly see that. Like, she didn't need to be told this woman is in a very bad way here. Now, Mary knew what needed to happen is this woman needs to get to a hospital. But they were nowhere near a hospital. And this woman clearly can't get up and walk. And Mary's thinking, I'm not strong enough to carry this woman to the hospital. Like, what am I gonna do? And, Mary's thinking, maybe if I just run and get help and they can come back here. But she's looking at this woman thinking, I don't know if she'll survive. She's probably gonna die soon. Like, this is gonna happen now. And so Mary, again, sort of in this weird autopilot mode, decides, you know what? I'm gonna stay right here with this woman. She can't even talk. She can't tell me what's going on, but I am gonna be here with her. I'm gonna be present with her. And if she dies, I'll be here to support her.
What? So she decided to be a good person, a decent human being. Guys, there are times, alright, where the answer is not to be a decent human being. The answer is be pragmatic, run back towards the mansion, call for help.
And so Mary just made herself comfortable. She took her jacket off, she put it over this woman, and then she began letting this woman sip from her brandy flask to, maybe kind of ease the pain. And all night, the two women just kind of sat there and laid together. When the sun finally rose the next morning, Mary looked over at the woman and saw she was still alive. And in fact, if anything, she seemed like her condition had maybe improved slightly. She seemed maybe a little bit more comfortable. Maybe that was from all the brandy. Who knows? But the woman seemed like she had stabilized a little bit.
Yeah.
Still couldn't talk or really tell Mary anything, but she seemed to be doing a little bit better. And so Mary's thinking, okay, the sun's up now. Now I can run out, get help, and get this woman the care that she needs.
All
but
right.
before Mary could even do that, she began hearing a stomping sound somewhere outside of the shed. And she realized it was a horse approaching. And so Mary, she bolts out of the shed and she looks over towards the road, and there's a horse pulling a covered wagon going right by, and Mary screams and yells and says she needs help. And a man pops his head out of the wagon and says what's going on, and Mary runs over to him and explains this weird situation, how there's this strange woman over here and she's clearly dying, she needs our help. And the man agreed to help. And so he went with Mary to the shed, he picked the woman up, he put her inside of his wagon, and then the three of them together in this wagon drove to Mary's husband's aunt's house. When they got there, the man carried the strange woman inside of the aunt's house, and then Mary told the aunt's maid to go call for the town doctor, and so she said she would. And so at this point, Mary was actually completely relieved. I mean, this was kind of a wild, very unexpected night. I mean, she doesn't even know who this woman is, but she's definitely happy that she's getting, some level of care here. But Mary sort of felt like her role in this was kind of diminished now. She's gotten the woman here and she's feeling so tired and weak from being up all night. And so Mary decided she would just take a nap. I mean, she had been up all night with this woman. She was exhausted. So into her bedroom she went, she climbed into bed, but as she's laying there, she realized she wasn't just tired. She actually felt kind of sick, like ill. And over the next few hours, as she kind of tossed and turned in her bed, not really...
See, again, you don't know what kind of disease the woman in the shed was holding. Or if that woman in the shed was transferring some kind of curse. Just don't do it, okay, you guys?
able to sleep, she would develop this horrible fever. And this fever would just get worse and worse and worse, and Mary would become bedridden dealing with this mystery illness for weeks, just drifting in and out of consciousness the whole time. It was October by the time Mary's fever finally broke. And on the day that it did, when Mary opened her eyes in this bed, she was clear-headed for the first time. I mean, really, it had been a very rough stretch of a few weeks. And so she's looking around the room, kind of taking stock of her environment, and she sees there's this strange person sitting in a chair in the corner. And her immediate reaction is, oh, this must be like a nurse or a doctor or somebody here that's kind of overseeing me.
Hello.
Mary was aware she had been very sick for several weeks and there were people in and out of the room. But she looked back at this person and realized she actually knew who it was. It was the woman she had rescued from the shed on the night she got sick. It was that woman. But now...
What's the betting that there's actually a good ending to this story? But this is a MrBallen's story, alright? There are no good endings.
She wasn't sickly and, dying. The woman looked completely healthy and happy, and she was smiling ear to ear at Mary. Like, this didn't make any sense. Like, what's going on here? And also, Mary just couldn't help but think, like, wait a minute, why is this woman still here? It has been weeks since I rescued her from the shed.
No good endings.
Why is she still here? Like, nothing's adding up. But before Mary could ask any questions, this woman, who clearly was super excited to see that Mary was now fully awake and attentive, this woman just starts talking a mile a minute. Like she had been waiting to dump all this information on Mary as soon as she was well. Like clearly this woman has been waiting diligently for her chance to tell her story. And the story that she dumped on Mary at her first chance, like this day, was incredible. The woman told her that a couple of years earlier, she had boarded the ship in England that was bound for Brazil. But about 5 days into their journey, while they're out on the open sea, the ship caught fire. It was this horrible fire. Everyone's trying to evacuate. And this woman said she was in her bedroom, asleep. She didn't even know what was happening. And while she's laying there and the ship is catching fire and beginning to sink, this stranger comes barreling into the room, literally wakes her up, scoops her up, and takes her to the top deck and gets her into a lifeboat right as the ship sinks. I mean, this stranger completely saved this woman's life. And so this woman, the stranger who had saved her, and a handful of other lucky people who had made it onto this lifeboat just began rowing in a single direction, hoping they'd find land. And luckily they did. They found this deserted island. And so they landed there. And for a year, this woman and the stranger and those few people subsisted on this island, barely clinging to life, praying for rescue. And amazingly, after a year of being shipwrecked, they flagged down a ship that did rescue them and brought them to England. However, when they actually got to England, things weren't that good. The stranger who had saved this woman had basically lost his mind from living on this island, not expecting to be rescued. Even though they got rescued, it was like he wasn't coherent anymore. He had lost it. Not to mention he was really ill from...
Usually when I listen to stories or when I read stories, I could honestly guess the ending at this point in time by now, but for some reason my mind or my brain simply isn't making that connection for some reason. Like, I honestly can't get the connection between this story and our protagonist's story.
The way they were living on this island, scavenging things that weren't necessarily edible, but just to survive, they were eating whatever they could. I mean, it was a very rough lifestyle. And this man, he just hadn't really handled it well. And so he got thrown in a hospital and placed in a particular ward for people that were mentally unwell, and he was basically forgotten about. However, the woman would tell Mary that, when this happened, she felt awful because she felt like this stranger had saved her life and she kind of owed him a debt. And so she decided it would be her mission to find the stranger's family and let them know where he was.
Okay.
And so the woman said she did some research and she figured out where one of his relatives lived. It was really far away on the other side of England. And so she spent all her money, using every vehicle she possibly could, every ride she could take, getting as close to this location as she possibly could.
Despite how he's describing it, England ain't that big.
And then when she ran out of money, she just kept on walking towards this destination. And she kept going until she literally ran out of food and water, but she wasn't quite there yet. She knew she was getting close, and she's just walking, and she's basically falling apart.
At the very least, this was Victorian England. There will be people,
so hell-bent on finding this family member for this stranger.
I mean, it's not like she's going in some sort of some sort of an expedition or something.
But she can't quite make it. She can't quite get to the family member's house. And that's when she finds this shed out in the middle of the field where she just collapses, thinking, okay, this is where I'm gonna die. And so back in the guest room, Mary is listening to this woman tell this unbelievable story. And at some point, the woman just kind of stops when she gets to the shed scene. And Mary's looking at her like, I don't really understand where you're going with this. I don't understand why you're here telling me this.
I don't get it.
And the woman, she just starts to laugh, like this joyous laughter, just nonstop laughter. And then she goes, don't you get it? And then seconds later, Mary hears footsteps, and a man walks into the bedroom, and it's Mary's husband. He was the stranger who rescued that woman. He didn't die in an accident 2 years ago like they thought. He was in a shipwreck, but he survived. He was the man who got thrown in the hospital and forgotten about. And it was this woman who was making the journey to his aunt's house to tell her that he was still alive. And it was only because Mary had that totally bizarre nightmare that sort of led her to that shed that she found this woman who would have died in that shed and never quite gotten to the aunt's house, and so never could have told the family, never could have told Mary that her husband's still alive. It was because of that dream that fate aligned, and now her husband was back. Mary and her husband's story wound up being published in newspapers all over the world. I mean, people really could not get enough of this.
What do you know? Happy ending.
Story. But despite how far-reaching this story became, nobody was ever able to come up with a logical explanation for how so many coincidences and this crazy dream Mary had, how it all came together to reunite Mary and her husband.
Interesting. What do you know? A happy ending!
Behind every story we tell are real people. That's why we started the MrBallen Foundation. to support victims and families impacted by violent crime. To date, with your incredible help, we've been able to donate over $1.5 million to these people in need. If you're already a part of this,
You know where to find them, you guys. Check out the links in the description down below. So if you want to make a donation to the Mr. Ballen Foundation, go for it.
movement, thank you so much. If you're interested in joining it and helping us help more people, click the link below.
Please do.
Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of today's episode in the comments.
Dude, I wasn't
And
expecting
remember,
that
we
ending.
have hundreds of videos for you to binge right now. But if you're looking for a recommendation from me of that one video that's worth your time, well, it's this one right here. So give it a watch. All right, until next time. See ya.
Bye!
Thank you for watching, guys. So if you want me to check out other stories here on YouTube, please let me know in the comments. We upload on the weekends, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Also, check out our Twitch channel where you can watch me do this live. And please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, do the whole notification button thing to help me out with the algo, and class dismissed.